There are people who have traveled the world and still feel like they missed their own life. And there are people who have barely left their hometown, yet somehow seem deeply alive inside each ordinary day. So maybe living fully has very little to do with how much life you manage to collect. Maybe the real question is simpler. When this moment arrives, are you actually here for it? Not physically. Anyone can physically exist inside a moment. The harder thing is to stop leaving it. A man sits across from his daughter at dinner after a long day of work. She is talking about something that happened at school. She is laughing. The kind of laugh that starts small and then surprises her. At one point she stops and looks directly at him. "Dad, are you listening?" And he realizes he has no idea what she just said. His body was at the table. His hands were wrapped around a cup. The room was warm, but his mind had been somewhere else entirely. Inside tomorrow, inside pressure, inside unfinished conversations that were still replaying themselves like a recording no one asked to hear. And maybe that is the quieter tragedy of being human. Not simply that life ends, but that so much of it passes unnoticed while we are still alive enough to live it. We keep waiting for life to become important enough to finally step inside it. But life was already happening. It was happening during the drive home, during the washing of dishes, during the silence that hangs in the air after an argument, before anyone decides what to say next, during the 5 seconds of wind against your face before your hand reached for your phone again. And strangely, many people never truly notice this until something disappears. A relationship, a parent, a season of youth, the health that was simply there one morning and then quietly wasn't. Only then does it become clear. The moment they were waiting for was the moment they were already standing inside. So what does it actually mean to live fully? Most people believe they already know. Before you go further, notice honestly whether any part of this has already been your experience, not as an idea, as something you've actually felt. Maybe we should look more carefully. When people hear the phrase "live fully," the mind usually moves in one of two directions. The first is accumulation, more places, more memories, more intensity. More experiences before time runs out, a larger life. And there is nothing wrong with experience itself, to love deeply, to fail and begin again. To stand in the presence of something so beautiful that for a moment the mind forgets to comment. All of these can open something in a person. The problem is not experience. The problem begins quietly, almost invisibly, when the mind adds a small clause to the experience. This must stay. I need more of this. This is who I am now. This is what will finally complete me. A woman spends years building the image of her life. The apartment careful and curated. The career constructed brick by brick. The relationship, the routines. The version of the future she first imagined at 25, standing in a city that felt like a beginning. And slowly, she begins protecting the image more than the life inside it. Then one day, the relationship ends. Not dramatically, no betrayal, no explosion of feeling, just two people who slowly became strangers without noticing it was happening. And what breaks her is not only the loss, it is the collapse of the story she had quietly believed would hold her forever. This is why pleasure alone cannot sustain a human life. Not because pleasure is bad, but because everything moves. The body changes, desire changes, people change. Even the things we swear we will always feel eventually shift their shape. And the tighter we hold, the more life begins to feel unstable beneath our hands, like trying to grip water. The second idea people carry about living fully sounds more spiritually mature. Be present. You hear it everywhere now, but presence by itself is not wisdom. Someone can be fully absorbed in anger, fully absorbed in craving, fully absorbed in the story of how unfair everything is. That is still a kind of presence, so something deeper is needed, not merely attention, but clear seeing. the ability to experience a moment without immediately turning it into a possession, an identity, or a problem that needs to be solved. This is where something begins to quietly change. There is an old habit inside the human mind, even when life is happening right here. The smell of coffee, the weight of a chair against the back, the particular quality of light at 4 in the afternoon. The mind keeps moving somewhere else. A man lies in bed at night, replaying a conversation from 6 years ago, still composing the response he should have given. A woman checks her phone 3 times during a sunset she would have once prayed to witness. Someone spends an entire vacation documenting moments they never fully entered. And all of this happens so automatically that most people never question it. They assume this constant movement of the mind is simply what being alive feels like. But look carefully. How many moments have you actually inhabited directly, without comparing them, editing them, mentally escaping them, or replacing them with something the mind considers more important? A person stands in the shower before work. Warm water touches the skin. Steam rises slowly. Somewhere outside, a car passes, but they are already inside tomorrow's meeting, already rehearsing failure, already imagining the outcome of something that has not yet arrived, already somewhere life has not happened yet. And then years pass this way, not because anyone intended it, but because the mind became more intimate with thought than with the reality happening around it. This is why some people reach the goals they spent decades pursuing and still feel strangely absent from their own existence, because achievement cannot solve separation. You can completely transform the conditions of your life while still never fully inhabiting it, and eventually, a person begins to notice something unsettling. The moments they considered small, too ordinary, too quiet, too nothing, were the actual content of their life. The morning coffee cooling in a white cup, the quiet ride through streets that looked the same every day, the ordinary Tuesday that asked nothing of them, the sound of someone you love moving around the kitchen while you pretend not to listen. This was it, not preparation for life. Not the waiting room before the real thing, life itself. A sink full of dishes, that is all. Nothing profound is being offered, nothing spiritual is being implied. No music playing quietly underneath the surface of the universe, just warm water, soap, the slight resistance of a plate. Late afternoon light entering through a window at a low angle, touching the counter and stopping there. And yet, for one brief moment, the mind stops arguing with the situation. No replaying the afternoon. No rehearsing tomorrow, no quiet narration about whether this moment should be different from what it is, only the warmth of the water, the small sounds of water moving, the movement of the hands, and strangely something relaxes, not because all problems have disappeared, but because the mind has momentarily stopped abandoning this moment in order to chase another one. There is an old teaching that points toward something extremely simple and extremely difficult, in seeing only the seen, in hearing only the heard, not the story built around the seeing, not the identity constructed from what was heard, not the interpretation the mind assembles in the half-second before the experience even finishes arriving. Just this. The sound of rain before thought decides it is depressing. The tightening in the chest before thought labels it failure. The sensation of grief before the mind transforms it into my broken life, or the proof that I am unlucky. This does not mean becoming cold or hollow. It does not mean watching your own life from behind glass, with careful emotional distance. It means allowing experience to appear without immediately imprisoning it inside self-centered interpretation. A person feels sadness. Usually the mind adds its commentary quickly. Why is this happening to me? What does this mean about where my life is going? How long will this last? But what if, for one moment, there was simply sadness, moving through the body the way weather moves through the sky, not denied, not dramatized, not analyzed into submission, not claimed as proof of something, just known clearly. As it is for as long as it lasts. This is what begins to free the mind, not controlling reality, not optimizing experience, seeing it more honestly. Most people have never tried this. They have been taught to manage experience, not meet it. This is the difference. A father carries his sleeping child from the car into the house. The weight of the child is familiar now. The particular way a small body becomes completely still when sleep arrives. The hallway is dark. The house is quiet. And then, without warning, he becomes aware of it. The child is almost too heavy to carry now, and something inside him breaks quietly, not because anything went wrong. Not because this is a sad story, but because he can suddenly see it. This moment was never going to stay. This is the strange tenderness hidden inside human life. Everything matters because everything passes, not as a sentimental observation, not as something to write on a wall just truthfully. The tea becomes cold. The music ends. The season turns without asking permission. People leave slowly or suddenly. Bodies age. Even joy cannot remain. And when we demand permanence from things that were never permanent, life begins to feel like a kind of cruelty. But when we finally stop requiring impermanent things to last forever, a different relationship becomes possible. You begin meeting life instead of trying to freeze it. You stop asking each moment to save you from all the moments that came before. You let them arrive. You let them leave. And somehow, this makes genuine intimacy possible. A sunset becomes more beautiful when you stop trying to own it. A conversation becomes more alive when you stop turning it into memory while it is still happening. Love becomes something cleaner when it is no longer mixed with the quiet demand. Never change, never leave, never die. The mind does not suffer because life moves. The mind suffers because it wants movement to stop. But life has never been still. Not once. Not for a single second in the entire history of the world. And something in us has always known this, even as we keep forgetting it. So what does it mean to live fully in every moment of life? It does not mean forcing yourself to be grateful for each second as it passes. Some moments are painful, some are confusing, some are lonely in a way that has no clear source. Some are simply ordinary, without meaning, without drama, without anything asking to be remembered. Living fully does not mean turning your life into a performance, and it is not the project of collecting enough experiences to finally feel complete. It means becoming willing to meet what is actually here, joy without immediately clutching at it, pain without adding a second layer of resistance on top of the first, beauty without the urgent need to possess it, loss without turning it into your permanent identity. A person sits beside their mother in a hospital room. It is late. Machines hum softly in the dark. Someone in another room coughs. The hallway light comes under the door in a thin line. There is nothing inspirational about the moment. No lesson neatly presenting itself. No wisdom being offered. Only fear, love, helplessness, the sound of breathing, theirs and hers. And yet, years later, they will remember that night with unusual clarity, because for once they were completely there. No escape, no performance, no screen to look at, no other version of life competing for their attention, just life meeting itself directly. This is why some of the deepest moments in a human life are not the happiest ones. They are the moments where the story briefly falls away. And for a few seconds, you stop resisting reality enough to actually touch it. Not the story of your life, the life itself. If something here has touched a real experience in you, feel free to share what you noticed in the comments. And if someone in your life is carrying this weight right now, this might be worth passing along to them. Most people spend years searching for a more meaningful life while standing directly inside one. They imagine awakening as something distant, a spiritual state requiring the right conditions, the right teacher, the right amount of preparation. But perhaps it begins much smaller than that. Perhaps it begins the moment you notice you have not truly listened to another human being in months. Or the moment you feel wind against your skin and realize you have been mentally absent from your own existence for longer than you can measure. Or the moment grief strips away distraction long enough for reality to become immediate again, sharp and clear, like cold water. The strange thing is this: life has been offering itself the entire time, not hidden inside extraordinary moments, inside ordinary ones. The sound of footsteps in the next room, the ache of wanting something you cannot name, the warmth of tea against the palm of your hand, the rising and passing of irritation during a slow afternoon, the brief silence before someone answers your question, that 1 or 2 seconds when the air is still and anything could be said, the sight of evening light touching a wall, moving slowly and then gone. None of it stays, and that is exactly why it asks to be met now, not grasped, not stored as memory, not turned into evidence of who you are, just known, seen clearly, the way a clear sky is seen, not held, because in the end, living fully may have nothing to do with extracting more from life. Maybe it is the opposite. Maybe it is finally allowing each moment to be exactly what it is, without demanding it become something else first. The sound, only the sound. The feeling, only the feeling. The thought, only the thought, arising and passing the way all things do, life moving as life, and the mind no longer trying to hold the river still, just seeing, just knowing, just this.